What's your rotation of choice? Each group's going to make an offering of what rotates. We'll see if they're smart Alex or not. Okay, so do you show us the box? I'll repeat it. I'll repeat it, otherwise it'll get tedious. Don't worry, I'll repeat it. So the elbow. Okay, so the movement that they demonstrated is this one. So you bend your elbow and your hand flips above, up and down. So we've done this movement a lot. I've asked you to put your hand palm up and palm down. So you've experienced this movement. You've experienced this movement, this versus this, right? Now that movement is a special kind of rotation, and you're correct, group, correct. You are right. You will go to heaven. That is in my power. No. The longitudinal axis is the length of the arm, so it's long to the forearm. And it's actually, if this guy does it, this is quite an interesting movement because hands up. So the belly of the hand is up, and it's called supination because supine is belly up. You lie on your back and your belly's up. That's supine. Supination is belly of the hand up. And it feels like it's in the elbow, but it's just below the elbow. It's actually a beautiful movement because one joint crosses over the other. His doesn't do it. But actually, these two bones that run parallel cross over. It's quite an exciting movement, actually. So it carries over, and this joint here spins, and then palm down is pronation. Prone, belly down. If I asked you to lie on your tummy, that's prone. You are pronated. It spins. So it's not a hinge joint. It doesn't happen. It's this, if you come and look at it, that little one there spins on itself. It's beautiful. It's a really beautiful little joint. That little joint there. And it spins. Choo. It's quite stable. It's very stable. It's a lot of muscles to hold it. Yeah, radius and ulna. So radius, look, I don't want to get into the big bone names, otherwise it'll freak out. Just know that it crosses over. Okay, and that flips the hand belly down and belly up. Now, why do we do it? To make it really clear, we've bent the elbow because somebody else might come up with a rotation of the shoulder joint. Sorry, is that yours? Okay. So if we have our arms long, we can rotate that way. So, think, well, Susan, why isn't that supination and pronation? Yeah, that's right. And it's a bit Charlestonish like that. It's happening at the shoulder. Put your hand on your upper arm. And when you rotate from the shoulder, can you feel that the belly part of your upper arm now goes in and out and in and out, right? So it's going, it's not going left and right, it's going in and out. So we actually call that internal rotation and external rotation because the belly part of your upper arm is carried in and out. Okay, and that's happening up here, whereas the pronation, supination rotation, this belly part of the upper arm isn't changing at all. The shoulder joint's not moving. So we've differentiated the rotation of the arms into two bits. And of course, we put them together to really go in. We put the two together. But you can actually not put them together. It's really hard though. So that's why that's why you work a screwdriver. You get a lot more rotational torque, using both. Torque is turning. T-O-R-Q-U-E, torque, not torque. Okay, so there's that. So this movement is around turning door handles and turning taps and, stuff like that. And, a little screwdriver. If you want to really, then you get the double torque from the shoulder and the pronation, supination. Yep. Or fencing, that sort of thing. So the way we would see rotation of the shoulder joint to differentiate is if you bend your elbow and you swing it in, then you see it more. You see the rotation more. You keep this part still. But think about this part that's moving. This one's just the fancy bit that this is just, you know, this is the magician's sleight of hand. You think this is where the action is. The action's actually up here. And look, feel the belly of the upper arm hiding inwards, exposing itself outwards, hiding inwards, going outwards. Feel that? So our shoulder joints rotate. Of course, they can rotate in any position. Just conventionally, we show it down here, but they're free to rotate in any position around the long axis of the arm. Is that clear enough? And we're doing that a lot. Now, this movement that you just did today is putting those two together with flexion and extension. Yeah, and the rotation's going right in here. Yeah, in fact, the shoulder, yeah. So we'll do a lot more about the shoulder complex with the collarbone and the connection to the sternum and the angel wings behind the scapula, because they rotate, and clavicle, collarbone. Yeah, so the anatomical word is clavicle, which is key. And we'll go into that really fine distinctions later about the incredible mobility of the shoulder girdle in relation to the ribs. Okay. What else rotates? Which group am I up to? I stole yours. Do you want to give me another one? Do you have another one? Spine. Okay, it's a big one. So, as Anna's group discovered, the spine does turn around itself, and it's cumulative, right? So, this is a classic. What you had to do today, when you first started, you were rotating like this. And what's not happening? Where's the rotation happening? Which part of the spine? Just in the neck, in the cervical. We call it cervical. Neck, yeah. Because in English, cervical is the neck of the uterus. So we say cervical, and then the Americans come out and go cervical, because they actually say this is cervical, and we go, no, that's cervical. I don't rotate my cervix. Well, you know. Yeah, it's like this. That's it. And it's, yeah, anyway. That's that. So this is neck, cervix. Latin for neck. So, and this again is Feldenkrais bread and butter, is that people come in and say, oh, I've got a really bad neck. And you say, when does it hurt? And I say, when I turn my head. And they go like this. Why do you turn your head like that and restrict? Why are you dead from the collarbones down? And now we can laugh about it, but we all do it. I'll ask you to do it. And the thing that changed in you today is your chest softened and your chest started to turn, so that the rotation was more cumulative and more distributed and more in keeping with our belief that involving more of yourself in a movement, however subtle, helps. So that if you think that this is rotating your head, then of course your neck's going to, and then you're going to say, I've got a bad neck. And you think, oh, poor neck, copping the shit for that, when it's actually the lazy thorax not doing anything, you know, just going... And the neck, you know, then someone's got a big deal about a bad neck, and it's actually it's being good. You know, it's being good. It's doing all the work, and it gets punished for it. Anyway.
Yes. Susan.
Yes.
I reckon that's a really big thing in our Western culture, hey?
Yeah.
Like that we're all locked up, like we don't notice, and we're all, like, because and there's heaps of movements, like, we're like, when we're driving and stuff, we're checking, we're always just like, we always, we just tip, and we totally,
exactly.
That's a really big, like, one that you see a lot. Hey?
Yep, and it's reflected in how many people have neck problems. Because we don't have that. Yeah, that's right. It inhibits. Yeah. There's a real problem, a real tension between stability and mobility in that instance, and they've gone a lot towards stability, and it sacrifices our mobility. Yeah, and that's ergonomics for you. You know, where you try and get the environment to give you stability rather than finding your own stability. up to a point. It's okay, I'll say it again. So the scapula involved in turning, depending on what you're turning for. Yes. So now we're just, and I said, I think I speak too fast. We'll deal with the scapula and the collarbone later. Today we're just really being quite reductionist. So why it's worth staying with the cervical spine is, remember yesterday I said there actually is a joint in the neck where there is an axis. It's called the axis. And it's a peg and it's vertical right up the top. And the atlas sits on it like that, like a ring. So if you can actually hold your neck quite still, the neck part, and your head can rotate on top of your neck quite a lot. And some people even do that. And it's the most intimately connected with our eyes. But all of our neck muscles are pretty intimately connected with our eyes. They have a strong association. They're siblings, right? But there is that capacity. This guy can't really do it because he's been fused. And you can't really see it, but when we do some anatomy stuff in the online segments, so he's got heaps of it actually, see? So his atlas can spin on his axis quite well. Really quite easy. He's not fused there, I'm wrong. Wrong as. He can't actually, oh he can rotate a bit around there. Holds up the head. So there was a Greek, that's right, you're allowed to say that. Yeah, you're allowed to talk, Hannah. You have my permission. Am I so authoritarian? Anyway, so yeah, atlas. In fact, there's some, and he holds it like this, doesn't he? On the back, like that. And I think Stephen Fry has even another qualifier. He's such a smarty pants, that guy. Anyway, so there is a lot of rotation in the neck. The most rotation of all the vertebrae is up the top, a lot of rotation here. Now, interestingly, there's quite a lot of rotation in the thoracic vertebrae, all of them, 12. There's 7 cervical, 12 thoracic. Again, we'll go over this many times. And you think that there's not a lot of rotation there because you think your chest is stiff, because getting back to your point, Naran, there's a common self-image in Western society, particularly that chesty bonds, you know, strong chest, standing up straight. So we freeze our ribs, and probably, you know, a big part of our revolution on the floor is that we free our ribs, like fly, be free, ribs free. And our ribs start to get this capacity to bend and come together and go apart in all sorts of directions, right? Flexion and extension and so on, and rotating and so on. We feel, our experience often is that we rotate a lot in our lumbar spine, but there's not a lot of rotation there, about 8 degrees. For 360, yeah, because of the shape of the vertebrae. But it's cumulative. So when we rotate, so I said keep your pelvis really still so you're not rotating in your hip joints, and turn. So where do you feel the turning happening? Again, our kind of vision is that it's distributed. So it's no one vertebrae, because that's when we get into trouble. Actually, mostly it's in our chest. We can keep our head quite still, but we see we've been differentiating that, right? Keeping our head still and taking our shoulders. Feel that, so I get back into the twisted bird position where you had to take your shoulders and your head stays still. You're twisting in your thoracic spine. You know, your shoulder blades are scooting on your chest a bit to create the illusion of more rotation. But we're really, really, really getting into rotating the thoracic spine in a rather beautiful way. Yeah, there's not a lot. Yeah, there's a bit of an illusion around how much is there. But it's there, and it's worth it. You know, so 8 degrees is 8 degrees. You know, 8% of the population's in South Australia. We're worth considering. We're not nothing. Somewhat, yeah. And the thoracic spine is underused. Yeah, but you know, a lot of people get pain right there. Computer people, right there, between the shoulder blades. Can I do that? You can tell because I do that. Like that. Anyway, okay, so we rotate in varying degrees along the vertebrae, and it can be more or less differentiated. Okay, what's another rotation? Your group. Hips, yes. So like the shoulder, so the shoulder joint and the hip joint are somewhat analogous. They're ball and socket joints. The longitudinal axis, the axis of the length of the leg can rotate around itself. His can't because he's fused or pinned, as it were. You did this movement yesterday, lying on your back, and I asked you to turn your toes out and in. Now that's pure rotation of the hip joint around the longitudinal axis of the leg. You want to do it to remind yourself how proficient you are in that? That's it. That's it. Yeah. Yeah. Good choice. So here's another funny thing. Just like I said, this is the same rotation of the shoulder when I bend the elbow, thinking about like I'm orienting to this part. If I want, the other way to really highlight, and we'll be doing this in an ATM later today, if I stop talking, lie on your tummy and bend your knee, and now take your foot in and out. So what's my right hip joint doing? It's rotating. Now, in this, because we've flipped our legs relative to our arms, in this instance, it's the back of, the front of my thigh is actually the hairy bit. So this is the belly of my thigh, and now it's going out. So but this is called internal rotation, because the front of my thigh is going inward. And that is called external rotation, because the front of my thigh is pointing out. Right? So that's in and that's out. Now, if you're thinking about my foot movement, that's the magician's trick again. You're not looking at the right part. The part that's actually moving, doing the movement, is my femur, my thigh bone, in my hip joint, right? And you're being fooled by my foot, which is not actually, it's moving through space. It's not moving in any joint. Is okay? So if I'm sitting like this, my hips are quite rotated. In what direction? External. Yeah. If I sit like this, internal rotation. You can still, yeah. Huh? Yeah, W sitting, and everyone goes, ah. If it's all you can do, I've worked with little kids, that's the only time their pelvis is stable, when they're in W sitting. And then they can use their hands. And you take them out of W sitting and they can't use their hands because they're not stable anymore. It's a stability thing. So if that's all they can do, that's sad that that's all they can do. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and after a certain age, you don't force it because it's pretty ferocious on your knees. When we're side sitting, what's happening in our hip joints? They've been doing this a lot. That's right. External and internal rotation. And then when I pivot around here, I'm rotating above, my hips. I'm still rotating in my hip joint, but I'm rotating the bit above. And we'll talk a lot more about that in 2 segments' time. But that's still hip rotation, right? I'm also rotating in my shoulder joint. Rotating in my shoulder joint and my hip joint. Cunning. My spine is extending up. I'm lengthening. Yeah, in the back hip. Yeah, that's right. Exactly. So we move in spirals, really. This is a spiral. A spiral is a combination of rotation and flexion and extension. Anyway, and what was we up to? Did you have a favourite rotation? So hip joints, big rotators. Big rotators. Yeah, go for it. Well, it's a good question. Yeah, we call it a rotation. Yeah. It's opening and closing. You could call it flexion extension, but it's actually a rotation. Jaws are amazing. We would tell them about the joint of the week. That's a bit of a distraction. You're going to start teaching each other this stuff, and we're going to give you joints, not this kind of joint. Sorry. Yeah. Like Jenny was telling me about the spiders, that, you know, the kind of web that a spider makes after it's had a. Anyway, the jaw is really interesting because it opens and closes like a hinge joint, but it also slides, so it's complicated. So it is a curious one. Let's go for another more orthodox one. You did the hand. We've done that one. Oh, the wrist. Okay. So in anatomical speak, the wrist doesn't rotate. Yeah, it does this along the longitudinal axis, but it doesn't. So this movement is really a combination movement around about 6 different joints. So we don't say that it does. And actually, if classically that kind of movement would be called a circumduction because it inhabits all the planes. It's not a rotation either. No. So it's a trick. That's a tricky one. There's another curious one like that where our experience is one of rotation, but it's actually more complicated than rotation. The thumb is the same. Yeah, the thumb. Now the thumb can do a rotation. It can rotate around itself, but it's really hard to isolate. What it does is circumduction. Oh, not voluntarily. No. There is. I mean, the knee has rotation in it, but it's hard to do voluntarily. I just gave you one. Wait, any other rotations that we like? So let's just say the ankle's the same. It does this kind of circumduction, but it's not a true rotation because it's happening at a lot of different joints. It's a composite movement. Our experience is one of turning, but it's not that true turning around a longitudinal axis. It's actually turning around an axis that's a point in space. That's the biomechanical difference. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. We're being reductionist. It can be quite unsatisfying when you relate it to our experience. Yeah. What else? Yeah, there is a Goldilocks part about rotation. Rotation happens as a result. It's very complicated biomechanically, but basically it happens as a result of the shape of the joint. Is that it's not a true. It's a hinge joint with a asymmetry, so that the tibia gets carried and twisted at the same time. So we'll park it because it's not like you can do it voluntarily. No, it's a different mechanism. Yeah, it's a mechanism related to the hinge joint, whereas this is related. It's a joint between this here and here. The joints of that. Yeah, but there is supination and pronation of the foot, and it's bringing the sole up and the sole out. Yeah, which means the sole of your foot flattens, so the belly surface of your foot goes flatter, and then you supinate and the belly surface of the foot comes up. But it's not that these bones don't cross over like the babies can really look at the soles of their feet and they can suck them. Oh, can you? Do you know what? I've never tried. Yeah. Is that you're breaking something to do the? Yeah. I teeter on vegetarianism, so the thought of playing with the joints is like I like to pretend that chicken meat. Yeah. I like to pretend that it just comes from packets. Exactly. Little fantasy of mine. Any other rotations? So eyes rotate, yeah, sure. That's not a joint. No, you're right. Yeah. Any other rotations you like?
Are there any like
well, there are some really subtle ones, like the collarbone rotates, but we don't. It's complicated. The ribs have a little rotation thing, but we don't call it rotation, but they do. The ribs have joint. There are little funny joints at the back that allow the ribs to do several different. They can move in different planes, which you can feel, like when you do this, and when you do, that and so on. We don't tend to call them true rotation joints in that they don't have a longitudinal axis. No, I reckon you've cracked it. Yeah. So this group were discussing this before. Is there any flexion, extension, or rotation within the pelvis? No. There's a tiny bit of rocking of this sacrum at these two big ear joints here, but it's not voluntary and it's tiny. In most adults, it's fused. And I'm living, unless you're pregnant, then it doesn't. And ask a pregnant woman if they're getting a lot of rotation in their sacroiliac joints, and they'll say, yeah, and it really hurts like buggery. And I had a car accident when I was younger, and this one was sublux, so came apart. This my right SRJ, and I'm here to tell you, it really, really hurts. Like really hurts. Like childbirth, not so bad. Mine's fused, yeah. Yeah, so yeah. You know a bit. Yeah. That's a classic fracture, the one that I did, which is separate here, crack through here, and separate, or actually crack through the top and bottom here. It's a really common one, so you can't wait there because that whole hemipelvis just goes up and down like that. So you just like that on your back. Now they pin it. I did it a long time ago. God on Christ, it's marvelous. Who knew? I'm inside, I'm a cripple. No, I'm just joking. It's not insignificant. No, I didn't say insignificant. Yeah. It's highly significant. Yeah. No, no. That's right. When people paraphrase me, I'll jump on you big time because when I'm saying it's so complicated. We're going to talk about it later. It's not insignificant. And again, people, those of you who've had fractures here, actually you picked on my only fractures. I fractured there when I was a kid. It really makes a difference, right? It's a very mobile joint. This joint is the only joint that connects our whole shoulder girdle to our chest. That little joint there. There's no other bony connection except that little joint. It's highly important.
I was reading it the other day and really trying to think into it. That's the sternum and then there's a bit above it.
The manubrium.
Yeah, and the manubrium, which then connects the collarbone. Manubrium is awesome.
Yeah.
If you can tune into that, then it's like kind of guide your hooking.
Yeah. Yeah, so some people worship the manubrium.
Yeah.
It's the top of the sternum.
Like the joint with the bone.
Here. So this part here, it's like a little shield.
Yeah.
It's our little shield. And then there's a pseudo joint here. And then there's the sternum body. And then there's this little zippy sternum, which is like a little coccyx.
Like the manubrium kind of guide you with it.
Yeah. So some people worship this as their guide. Larry and there's another real big anatomist, Feldenkrais practitioner in the States, and they have this argument about whether they worship at the temple of C7 or T1. So some people do that. They orient from there. Jeff Haller had I don't know if he still does. He had an organizing principle around the fifth metatarsal. So here. All right. So, you know, they're all orientations, right? That may or may not, you know, that can be useful, right? Okay. So we've gone off track as usual. Rotation. I reckon you've covered the main rotating things. So the muscles that rotate, so the flexion extension muscles, remember I use this word agonist and antagonist, the one that does it and the one that opposes it. With the rotators, it's not so clear cut because funnily the flexors are schizophrenic and they can become rotators if they pair up with a different partner. So it's not so clear. So there are some muscles that we call rotators as if that's all they do, but oftentimes we rotate by using muscles in a different synergy, a different coupling to rotate us. So that's where you get that motor control thing about, you know, if our muscles are all the letters of the alphabet, you can put them together in different words. Yes. Yeah. Partly. Hamstrings, biceps is two. Hamstrings is the biceps, yeah. You use one side more than the other, yeah, you can. Yeah, yeah. So there are some muscles, like with the pronators, there's a dedicated little pronator, but the biceps can supinate, it does that. If you feel, you can feel it, right? You turn your hand over and you can feel your biceps works. It's not necessarily the long head. The long head gives us this with biceps because it goes over the shoulder joint. But the biceps is incredibly complicated. It can do this, it can do this, and it can do this. So you think, is the biceps super intelligent? It's the brain that thinks about that. So the brain doesn't think about muscles being all short or all long. It thinks about it in combination with other things, right? So it puts them together with different buddies to achieve different outcomes. So if I want... Oh, look, I'm a neuroscientist, it's the brain. So I can't give you any other answer, the brain. See, they're not reflexes, they're learned. The withdrawal reflex, you can inhibit it. It's there, and then you accommodate it. It's still the nervous system. Still the nervous system. It might be the spinal cord. So spinal cord and brain, they work together. Yeah. Yeah. It's when the bodies of the cells are, yeah. Yep. Oh, Tom. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. But you know, it is. You're right. They are, and it's you know, we choose anatomically to separate them out, as it were, the nervous system from the rest of the body. But you know, having dissected several human bodies in my career, you know, it's not that clear. You can tell the difference, but with, you know, anyway. All right. So that's enough of our. One more question. Ergonomics, yeah. Yeah. Your seat doesn't know how expensive your chair is. Your back doesn't know how expensive your seat is. Yeah, yeah. 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 You know, and we do the same. We put orthotics in our shoes. And look, if you don't want to think about your foot posture, put an orthotic in your shoe and you don't have to think about it. It will do it for you. It'll only do one thing for you. It will lift your arch up. It won't drop your arch when you need to drop your arch. It will just hold it up all the time. And the same with the chair. It will do one thing for you. It will keep your pelvis forward if you've got it set up, which is nice. But that's just one thing. Yeah, lasts for a while. And you know, you'll read that when in the awareness from movement book, That's why Feldenkrais says that there's no one ideal posture. And ergonomics assumes that there is one ideal posture. And those of us who have to work with seating for kids with disability, there's the assumption that we get the ideal posture for them. Well, that's only one thing. And it doesn't matter how beautiful your airplane chair is, after 2 hours, it's still hell, whether it's ergonomic or not, because it's static. One shape fits all, yeah, yeah. So it's not even customized to you. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, that's bliss. It's bliss. It's bliss. Okay. No, we won't do 5-minute ATM because you'll freak out. We'll finish. Is that all right? How are we feeling about rotating? Washing machine? Shh, shh. Agitator? Shh, 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 shh. Go, Nat.